Has Williams been ruined by the touch of its brand new boss? And James Vowles is just basically an overrated nerd? I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a nerd. I mean, you're looking at one right now, but overrated? Now this is something that perked my interest during a 5 AM scripting session, and it comes from the desk of not Jacques Villeneuve or Ralf Schumacher, but one Mark Schurrer, a former F1 driver. In short, Schurrer's comments were to do with the notion that Williams were onto something good under the previous management, and when James stepped in from Mercedes in 2023, that he was merely riding the coattails of what Jos Capito was able to do before him. Now, to be fair to Herr Schurrer, I will just give you the full quote in terms of context instead of cherry-picking. Why should they suddenly get so much better now? They've got worse this year. You mustn't forget that. I've often said that James Vowles is simply overrated. Jos Capito built a car with his people. James Vowles came to Williams, took the car, and they finished in the points. It looked really good, and all the praise went to James Vowles, but not to the man who built the car. Jos Capito was gone, and now that he is building his own car this year, the car is too heavy and too slow, and the updates are too slow. I think they have clearly deteriorated at Williams. Now, okay, in theory, that statement is not inaccurate. If you're just looking at this year in isolation, yeah, it's not exactly great. And the comments that Logan and Alex have had to share amongst the media about their team, it's not been good, which kind of got to a low point in Hungary where Albon just rated their strategy department as completely disappointing, not good enough. And as for Logan, I mean, oh goodness, that was just a completely utter mess. So yeah, okay. I'm not saying that what's happened with Logan this year is his fault entirely. He's had to make do with what he's been given, and right now, Williams is not a place where a rookie can really find their feet in terms of Formula One. He's just there mainly because he was part of the academy. Latifi dropped out, and they had big plans for him, rushed him in too early. He was just there, and he did the best that he could. I do think the way the team has handled his second season in Formula One has been just embarrassing. Okay, you might be thinking I'm not making a great argument in their favour, but the simple matter is this. Williams was practically an antique of a team when James came along. Something had to be done. And I don't think you need me to tell you about all the headlines that have been generated regarding Williams, stuff that was new back about 2 decades ago, that they use Microsoft Excel to keep a tab of what they've got in their inventory. What? This is weird. This is like 1990s stuff. But the thing is, though, is that whilst it is a little bit laughable and ridiculous to see these headlines come to pass, but honestly I would rather find it out from the source himself, James, rather than this come out in some kind of leak, a disgruntled employee dropping this news and then just letting the media have at it with little context from the team principal himself. It would have been even more embarrassing. And I think that level of transparency has actually caught a lot of people off guard. You don't often see that in Formula One. You know, an organisation or a team or a boss just going, oh, yeah, we're a bit rubbish, innit? Now, in regards to the comments from Schurrer, I would like to present to you a little bit of debunking. In regards to Jos Capito, I think his comments are an example of some German bias. Wait, are you sure, Law? You mean that other countries can be biased towards their fellow countrymen and their drivers? No, that's just not possible. I thought British bias was the only kind of bias in Formula One. No, I can't comprehend. No, British bias is absolute. I know, it's hard to fathom, but it's true though. You just got to look at where Mark Schurrer comes from. He comes from Adlersdorf in Switzerland, which is right on the border of Germany. It's in the German-speaking region of Switzerland. The majority of the people in Adlersdorf speak German, and would you look at that? Jos Capito is German. The whole situation regarding the departure of Jos Capito at the time was a little bit of an enigma. No one was quite sure why he left. Yes, 2022 was a little bit of a wake-up call. It was a pretty dire situation when it came to Williams. 2021 looked so good, and then the brand new rules came in. Their brakes caught fire in the pre-season testing, and it all fell down from there. It was a little bit of a bad time. So many people would have interpreted Jos Capito leaving, him just thinking that, oh, the team is a complete write-off, I'm just leaving before the ship truly sinks. Well, no. There was a perfectly rational explanation as to why Jos left, which kind of got overlooked by the news of James Vowles arriving at Williams. You know, British bias is around, so I'm guessing, you know, James Vowles, a British guy, taking over Williams, a British team, even though it's got some American money attached to it, so, you know. Here's what Jos had to say. I'll give you the full quote again, so you're getting a twofer, just to provide full context and make it absolutely clear. I originally said I would do this for 2 years, and possibly a third, but in the meantime, there are so many races, it is quite exhausting. He's not wrong there, I wouldn't blame him for wanting to leave, it's such a big cultural shock. And it takes longer than 2 or 3 years to bring the team back to the top. I simply believe that you have to lay the foundations first, and once that is done, you can build on it. I was convinced that this was the case, and communicated it to the board. Now you have the base. You should have someone who will stay there for the long term and continue from there. We talked about what is the right thing to do now for the team, and then it became clear quite quickly that now would be a good time to hand it over. I have already worked closely with James, Mercedes, and the drivers. He is very competent, and I like him very much. He is also a good person, so of course, I congratulated him. So, okay, for those of you wondering, including Herr Schura, Capito wasn't against the idea of someone replacing him. In fact, he effectively blessed the appointment of James Vowles. He rated the guy taking over his job, being the guy to then take what he had managed to establish over 2021 and 2022 and go from there. Give Capito his due. He managed to take back a team who scored nothing in 2020 to them scoring something the following year. And that was a victory in of itself. Basically, this entire rebuilding of Williams began with Yost, and James is now the guy who's taking it through to the next phase. Okay, you might argue that James is getting far more TV coverage than he is supposed to. He's certainly getting a lot more coverage than most team principals out there. But the thing is, though, is that this is the kind of situation that we've seen before, and James has plenty of experience of. He's been around the block a few times when it comes to down-and-out teams which then suddenly rise to the top again, or certainly perform a lot better than had previously been expected. And let's not forget his first season of Drive to Survive, where he was introduced and portrayed as a bit of a lovable data geek, a little dork, who liked his coffee a certain way, and he loved spending time in the simulator. And given that he and George worked closely with Mercedes having George as a junior, and then he went to Mercedes and Williams, maybe that explains why he likes lattes. As for me, I personally like good old filter coffee, and if a push, cortado, which I discovered was a thing in Finland, and it's a Spanish thing, okay, whatever. Continuing on from Shura's comments, do I think that James is overrated? Well, if you look at the drop in form from 2023 to 2024, then you might think that. But however, I reckon he's more culpable of oversharing, if anything. But hey, that attitude is what bagged him the attention of one Carlos Sainz, and has now blossomed into a wholesome beginnings of a relationship, and I cannot wait to see the wedding photographs. And in some cases, he goes full-on movie quotes, the cheesy kind, by just suggesting that his rise in Formula One sort of mirrors Carlos's in a way, that he finds himself at a team, he then makes a change to a team which seems lesser than the one he's previously at, but then actually it sets off a journey of self-discovery. He's able to find his full potential, and then the next phase of his career starts from there. You know, Carlos starts in the Red Bull camp, goes to Renault, goes down to McLaren, then finds himself at Ferrari, James's thing. He's almost getting to that point where in movies he's just going to Carlos, "We're not so different, you and I." One thing needs to be perfectly clear here, though. It's that the Williams project isn't something that's going to be like a Mercedes story, where they spend a couple of years not winning, but then turn it around. Yeah, for starters, Mercedes never really fell off. They were at worst third in the Constructors. You might argue that this year is technically worse since they're fourth, but you never know, they might get back to third by the end of the year. It's more of a McLaren story, if anything, if you need to compare teams, of how long it's going to take. A decade in the wilderness for that team or so before finally finding a strong foothold? Back in the late 2010s, it became very clear that Williams was a team full of really odd quirks that lasted the test of time, that there were cliques, they had ways of doing things, they insisted on doing everything in-house, they had their own engineering and developing department, they had their own heritage department. There's just a lot of tradition. And tradition is good in places, but sometimes it can just completely blinker you, deny you the ability to actually look outside and realize what's going on around the world and think, maybe we should try and adapt if we want to survive or anything. So yeah, just a lot of stubbornness, which is now being eradicated. And only now is the team being refreshed, and last year you look back and they were able to score a decent chunk of points with facilities that would even make Sauber and Enston look brand new and innovative. That's got to count for something, you know? These days, where F1 is completely riddled with technology that make your eyes water and explode. They were able to work with 2000 stuff and still score points and make a competent car that is within maybe 1.5 seconds of the main teams or something like that. That's got to be credited. And according to VALS, he doesn't really care much about what happens in 2024. He's more excited of what will happen over the next few years, starting from next year, when Pat Fry's first Williams car comes into play and Carlos gets behind the wheel of it alongside Alex. I've said this before, and I will say it again. Williams, for the first time in probably 2 decades or something, has a driver lineup which looks incredibly solid with 2 experienced drivers at the helm. You had Mark Webber and Nick Heidfeld in 2005, and now we've got Carlos Sainz and Alex Albon. Both drivers, ironically refugees from the Red Bull camp, but they're also experienced in their own right. And that lineup looks incredibly competent. It's not the worst lineup on the grid at all. And you might be thinking that Carlos is just settling for Williams because it's the best of a bad bunch, and if you're looking at this year, again in isolation, you might have a point. But when you compare the team to Alpine or Sauber, Williams has gone through the initial pain phase already, and it's now rapidly fixing itself by gaining over 200 new members of staff over the course of a year, thusly reducing the workload on individuals and reducing the pressure. It's managed to secure its biggest sponsorship deal in its entire history, even bigger than Pastor Valdonado's Venezuelan oil deal. Although I will admit, on the surface, it doesn't really help Williams' reputation as being as slow as a tractor if their title sponsor is effectively a company that makes tractors. There's a lot to be optimistic about regarding the team, and the comments of Shura are simply unfair and misguided. Capito got the team back from the brink, yeah, but VALS has now brought in the groundwork to reset the team, much like how the Hungaroring has been reset, and its main pit complex has been demolished in just a couple of weeks after Oscar Piastri bagged his first win, just so Liberty Media wouldn't scream at them anymore. I get it. It's really hard to look at Williams right now, their really overweight car, and think that they can be competitive in just a year or two's time, but let's remember, like with Alpine, so long as they can get a handle on the weight issue, they could probably drop half a second in terms of pace, and that could bring them right back into play when it comes to points. It's a relatively easy solution, but it will take a little bit of time. At least there's no problem when it comes to downforce and aerodynamics, at least according to Alex and James. That's something. I also get that it's a little bit of an easy target to just poke fun at Williams and go, look at that, they're just a really slow team and they can't do anything, ha 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 ha. But may I remind you that James VALS has been around the block a few times. He was around when Ross Brawn was able to take a team from certain ambiguity when it came to their future and then get them to the top twice. Brawn was a whiz when it came to looking at the bigger picture, interpreting the rules about what was to come, and then going from there, meaning that sacrifices would have to be made along the way. When he took over at Honda for 2008, he took a look at their car for the year and just shoved it in the corner to work on what would become the BGP 001. This delightful car, actually, with a little polymer clay model of my bearded uffer in it, with a little top knot so she can actually see, that's just a trait that bearded collies have. And by the way, Astrid's Creations on Facebook made this, the model, not the car, and they do take commissions, and not sponsored, by the way. I just wanted to share. Look at little bearded collies, they're really cute. Brawn did it again for 2012 and 2013, albeit to a slightly lesser extent when they realised that the rules could actually play into their favour, Mercedes. The point is, though, is that James VALS was there at the Brackley-based team for both events and saw what could be achieved. And he wants to do the same now with Williams, his current project. And I'm not saying this guy is perfect. He is not the ultimate team principal, but at least he is a pragmatic one who you can get behind in a way. Although I will admit he has made quite a few missteps when it comes to the Williams Academy, which is ironic in a way, considering that he was a major player in the forming of the Mercedes Junior team. And what happened with Logan, I mean, he did the best that he could, but even then it was still not that great. And now reportedly, Franco Colapinto in F2 was going to be getting a shout to partner Alex in 2025, and that might have come to fruition had Carlos Sainz not signed on the dotted line, and he actually mentioned it on Argentinian TV that he was this close to securing the bag for 2025, but he just couldn't quite do it. Kind of like how Teo almost secured the bag for Sauber this year, but then Zhou Guanyu came along. But in any case, James has experience in timing regenerative projects. Sometimes it comes with a lot of pain and a lot of honest conversations. In his mind, VALS needs to lay all the cards on the table, hide nothing, show as much data as possible since he does like his data. He hopes that just being transparent and upfront with people that he wants to bring on board, be it staff, sponsors, drivers, what have you, is enough to be able to convince them that he is the real deal, and that being down to earth and real will bag them a really good long-term future. unlike what Alpine and Audi have been accused of in recent times, of just promising the world, giving people anything they want, delusions of grandeur, promising everything that they're going to be great, it's a guarantee, and then not really being able to deliver, or people just looking at that whole thing and just going, okay, I don't really see it. Although I will admit that Audi had been better in recent times, getting Mattia Binotto, Jonathan Weekly. That's been a really good coup and has actually really improved them in terms of my estimations. And as for their lead driver, Alex Albon, who has chosen to commit himself to Williams for even longer than he had originally, him actually rebuffing any chances of a Red Bull ticket because, you know, he would have been there, and I think that Red Bull kind of wanted Alex back in a way, but obviously that didn't happen. He believes that Williams can do it, even though he does admit that it might be 2027 when Williams can challenge for wins again. 2026 might get them back into the fray, but it's still going to take a little bit of time. But then again, it does make you a little bit confused because there's been a lot of talk about Carlos Sainz and exit clauses, that he would only sign for a team if there was a clause in his contract which meant that he could leave the team in 2026 if their plans did not come good, and he can then find another team in which to try and make do. But reportedly, Vowles has said that there isn't a clause, that Carlos has dedicated himself entirely towards the future of the team and, of course, his next phase in his career. And who knows? Carlos might come good, Ferrari might want him back. It depends on what happens with Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton, come 2028 or whatever. But the point is that I do have confidence in Williams and what they can do. And clearly, a lot of big-name people in the sport and big-name companies believe the same thing. Duracell, they signed up with Williams a couple of years ago, but it was a little bit of an underrated and undermentioned sponsorship integration. But now Duracell's going all in. Yes, the battery motif was fantastic, but now you're getting the mascot of the company on there, you're getting TV advertisements with Williams and Duracell. They're really upping the ante because they believe in the company. Komatsu, all of that money. Darlton's not having to foot the bill entirely. They've now regenerated Williams into a compelling brand for all concerned. That's got to be rated in some shape or form. And of course, them being just simple and not just being pompous and over the top and ridiculous, yeah, that's actually working and getting fans, even though I do think Williams has angered a lot of American fans, what with them treating Logan the way they are, and I will admit that that was a misstep. And honestly, when Capito left, I had no idea where the team was going to go. And especially when Latifi was dropped, taking his sponsorship money and good vibes with him, as well as his Nutella, I had no clue as to the future of Williams. But the biggest plus for all of this is that Carlos did go to Williams. He didn't take a risk with Audi, he wasn't swayed by Alpine, Red Bull and Mercedes. That didn't come to pass even though there was a space available. Carlos was the only person reportedly that James was fully committed to discussing terms with, and that was a really big commitment. And I do feel like Carlos's work ethic will do well at Williams because, yes, Carlos does like to complain on the radio, but I would argue that he is like Alonso in being able to read the overall race instead of just his own. And the butting of heads at Ferrari was prevalent on a regular basis, him going against the grain. You've only got to look at what happened with 2 of his victories. It came from him ignoring team orders and just going it alone, doing his thing. A strategic effort on his part, which then paid dividends, much to the chagrin of the way Ferrari does things. He sort of forgot the script. He antagonized the Tifosi by just thinking of himself, his own ambitions, rather than just letting Ferrari do its thing and remembering that you work for Ferrari, the entity, rather than just you, who happens to be driving a Ferrari. And of course, you know, making Charles Leclerc look bad and the strategist look bad. That's just something you don't do at Ferrari. Whereas with Williams, I think that sort of behavior would be encouraged, that James Vowles would be more than happy for drivers to think on their feet and actually provide a lot of feedback and input, but also, you know, having some data to back it up as well and not be a bit of a wet blanket like McLaren is at the moment. It's what I reckon George Russell learnt during his tenure at Williams and what he's carried over to Mercedes. He had to fight for every single point, or even just trying not to be last in the case of 2019. And whilst it wasn't appreciated fully at Mercedes until just this year, Williams is a hustler of a team who will seek any opportunity to get ahead. And with the likes of Alex, Carlos, James on board, as well as all of the new hires they brought in, as well as all of the new sponsors, Pat Fry, their new technical director, I think the future of them looks bright, that they are going to be working as a proper team, all in the pursuit of bringing Williams back to the top, because Williams does deserve to be in Formula One. They are a key part of its history. there is a reason why they have a heritage bonus. It's not as big as Ferrari's, even though I think Ferrari's is being cut in the next couple of years. But Williams do get something for sticking around as long as they have. And I think that Williams needs to be preserved. And I'm glad that Doralton has recognized the importance of Williams as a brand and then actually embracing their history and their legacy and hoping to capitalize on it and bring them back to the top and make them competitive again after a really bad spell in the last few years. And what's making me really smile at the moment is that Claire Williams is coming out of a shell. She's now recovering from the hurt that understandably was the case back in 2020 when she did sell up. She's talking to the media again. She's in Drive to Survive as a talking head, which is great. And now she's more open to talk about what happened at Williams and maybe start to do more stuff with Williams. Bring the Williams family back into the team, only emboldening their authenticity. And heck, she even rates James Vowles' hiring as their new team principal as a brilliant coup. And Williams has been doing a lot of that lately. They've been able to get brilliant coups in almost every respect, whereas Alpine, Audi, or Sauber, they've really struggled. So in answer to your question, Herr Schurer, no, I don't think James Vowles is overrated. Although I do think he does need to fix the academy, so just sort that out and then we'll be good, okay? Now, speaking of fixing and academies, F2 needs to do some major repairs of their own to make sure it remains relevant in bringing talent to F1, as the cars are too slow, unreliable, and irrelevant even with the new machine, and it's just looking bad. To find out why I think the entire mess that I was concerned with last year has only gotten worse this year, go and watch this video next. I shall give you the full details over there. I shall see you there.